viewers. It's nice to virtually be with you again, and I am going to do a review, my first review video of Paper 1. My man Finian is not with me today. He just took a very angry nap. He didn't know what he needed, and we figured out that it was that he needed to go to sleep. So we'll see if he wakes up halfway through, and then maybe I'll go get him. But anyway, we're talking about Paper 1 here. This is the first part of the IB history exam that you will take. Oh, it just fell. I thought Finian was like walking out here for a second. Sorry. Hang on, I gotta go check him. All right, we made that a whole one slide before we needed to get him. So here we go. Sorry, my. All right, people. So hi, Finny. Let's talk about paper 1. So paper 1 is 20% of your overall score, and it's 1 hour of exam time. It's the first thing that you do when you walk in and take the IB exam. I got the little outline right here about what each question is, but I was going to go through them separately. But you can take a look at that if you like. The whole paper is 24 marks. If you want to get that 4, at least you got to get about half of the points, so like 12. Which isn't hard, so don't freak out about this one. This one is, we want to knock this one out of the park so that we don't have to worry so much about paper 2 and paper 3. Anyhow, so it's a source-based examination based on the prescribed subjects, and all that means is that you got to do the one that we actually covered in class, which was the move to global war. I got that right, her. So our subject is move to global war, which was the causes of World War II or Axis expansion. So it's going to be on one of 2.5 topics, basically. It's going to be 4 sources, and it's either going to be on German expansion, Italian expansion, usually the invasion of Abyssinia, or Japanese expansion, especially related to Manchuria and China. There's 4 questions, and it is 24 marks. And you can see how they break down right here. Part A, Part B, second question, third question, fourth question, 3, 2, for a total of 5, 4, 6, and 9. Vinny, how do you feel about that? Okay. So, question 1, here's an example right over here of a source that you would get for question 1B potentially. 1A is usually from a primary source text. So question 1A will ask you about supporting details of a particular source. It'll say why, according to source X, why did blah, or what were the reasons for blah, blah, blah. It's usually a primary source text. It's not usually a secondary source. It's not usually a visual of some sort. Couple things. It's worth 3 marks. 3 marks, and it's very important that you give 3 specific details. That's why it's worth 3 marks. They don't tell you what are 3 reasons. I don't know why. It's stupid that they don't say it that way, but they don't. So anyway, I'll let you look more at him than at me, but make sure you pay attention. Also, get into the habit of explain, then quote. The examiner wants to know your interpretation of the source, not a quote and not a basic paraphrase. So you're going to have to go a little bit beyond just what it says in the text, maybe include a little bit of information that you already know. Sometimes this is harder to do than others, and I think the examiners kind of understand if it's simple, it's simple. Just keep it that way. But don't rewrite verbatim something from the source because they don't know that you actually know what it means, even if it's obvious. So explain and then quote is what I like to say, because if you explain it in your own words, you might find usually 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, you don't actually need to quote that thing. Question 1B asks you about the main idea or the argument of one of the sources. It's usually a visual, like a political cartoon like this one about the feckless response by the League of Nations to Japanese expansion to Manchuria. It's worth 2 marks. 2. Which means that you gotta talk about 2 separate ideas. It's gonna usually make like a very obvious argument, like the main argument it's making, and then it's probably gonna have a secondary one. So make sure you talk about both of them, and make sure you explain how you arrived at your answer based on an element of the source. So you can tell that this was a feckless response by the League of Nations because all the lady is doing is kind of shaking her finger at Japan and just being like, drop it. And that's not very full of feck, as we know. Yes. Question 2 is an OPCVL, an origin, purpose, content, value limitation of one source, 4 marks. Look at that, 4 marks. That means that it's fewer marks than question 1. Okay, do well on question 1 so that you don't have to worry so much about this one, even though we've been working on this for God knows how long. Okay, so it'll say something like, with reference to its origin, purpose, and content, analyze the value limitations of source, blah, in this case A, to an historian studying blah, and it'll have some specific thing about the topic that you have to know about. You got to talk about both values and limitations using each of the components. So you have to use origin sometime in there, purpose sometime in there, and content sometime in there. I want a quick plug-in for the Super Duper Paper 1 guide. It's also included in the IB History starter pack I gave you at the beginning of this year, but you should have this where it goes through all the different types of questions that you need to answer and how to answer them, so I don't have to talk about them all here. Okay, I can do a breakdown a little bit more of some of the other ones or some of these specific questions if you'd like. But this kind of gives you some examples of what to say generically about some sources. That's right, Finian. You will become a discerning knower. You got to use each of those at least once. It's best to have 2 values and 2 limitations. If you notice, there's a reason that they do this. This is 4 marks. It's kind of implying that you need 2 values and 2 limitations for 2 points each. It's not exactly like that, I don't think, but it's kind of like, seems like where they're going. So it would be nice if you have time to come up with 2 values and 2 limitations, which means that you got to use one of the components at least twice. So you might say a value of the origin of value limitations. You do not need to say a value limitation of each thing, okay? Maybe the origin is just valuable, and maybe the purpose is both valuable and limiting. So keep those in mind. Also, make sure you're talking about how you know what you know about the source, how you know the purposes to inform, how you, like what the historical context was. You don't have to explain how you know that, but you know, what was it, why does it matter, those kinds of things. Use OPCVL sentence frames. I have a handout. Again, it's in the starter pack. It's been in the IB resources that I have. So it'll basically give you like starting sentences, what to fill in, ending of the sentence, what to fill in, so that you can do well on that part. That's it. Question 3 is a comparison of 2 sources, and it's 6 marks. In my opinion, this is the easiest question. Well, not the easiest, but I think it's the best question because it gets you a ton of marks in comparison to some of the other questions, and I don't think it's very difficult as long as you understand both the sources. Yeah. So usually it's focused on 2 secondary sources from different historians. They might use a primary source every now and then, but usually I've seen them be 2 secondary sources, at least in recent years, from 2 different historians. To receive full credit, you got to talk about both similarities and differences. If you don't do that, I think the most you can get is like 3 out of 6, which still can get you in that 4 range, but do both, okay? They're going to have similarities as well as differences. Write 1 paragraph on similarities and 1 on differences, not 1 paragraph on source A and 1 paragraph on source B. That leads you into just kind of describing the source if you do it that way. So make sure you think about what similarities do I want to talk about, what differences do I want to talk about, and maybe you'll have 3 paragraphs, maybe you'll have 2 on similarities and 1 on differences, or vice versa, but at least 2, 1 similarity, 1 difference. Things you want to consider when you're looking at the sources, I think the one that smacks you in the face is what's the content of each source. So what are the main ideas? What is the topic of focus? Is one focusing on the economics of an issue and one is focusing on more of the political system? What details are included or not included in each one that may support the argument? What do they choose to include? Okay, that's important. Let's get a quick spittle wipe here. Oh yeah. If you want to go beyond that, I wouldn't make this your primary focus, but you could consider other components of the source, like the author's point of view, the historical context in which they were written, and how that might make them similar or different, or how their purposes are similar or different. Is one trying to be very persuasive, where the other one is more like informative? How do you know that? But again, I think the bread and butter here is going to really just be, they want to know that you can interpret the source and that you understand, how to express conceptually those similarities and differences. 6 marks. And finally, everybody's favorite, question 4, which is a mini essay. It's 9 marks. There are the mark bands. Am I boring you? Goodness. There's 3 of them, 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9. We want to get into this range, please. Okay. However, I just want to point out before I even get into anything that if you don't include outside knowledge, according to the language of this rubric, you're stuck down here. So you got to get something thrown in there that's beyond the sources, okay? So make sure you do that. Even if it's just a basic example, okay, you can at least get yourself in that 4, okay? But make sure you have some outside example. You're going to be asked a broader question in which you're going to use the sources and your own independent knowledge to write a little mini essay. I'm going to explain why I call that mini essay. You've done this in class, okay? You know how to do it. I'm just going over it again. Use at least 3 of the sources. Usually they're willing to give you full credit if you use 2, but you might use one incorrectly. Use at least 3, if not 4, so that you can get the full credit for using the evidence. It's all laid out there for you. You just got to decide. This is the hard part, is deciding how do they fit together. You want to base your essay on topics and then think about which sources can fit into your understanding of those different topics of your essay. Paraphrase, do not quote. Don't waste your time rewriting language from the source. The examiner has seen the sources. They know the sources. You just paraphrase the main idea and then explain your analysis. Then you don't narrate as much and it's going to save you time. So don't quote on this thing. I say this over and over again, but I still see people do it. Just paraphrase the main idea. Cite the source after you use, if you paraphrase the main idea, like in parentheses, I'm writing with my whole hand. Source 1, yeah, that's what that says. Here's a structure for you. Do your thesis. Think about what type of question it is. Is it change in continuity, causation, significance? So you're going to have X, which is your lesser cause, or your change if there was more continuity, or your continuity if there was more change. However, A and B, these are going to be your 2 main points, therefore Y. Then you've got your main idea 1, your main idea 2, and your main idea 3 if needed. And then what you can do is you can try to think about what sources fit into main idea 1, which ones fit into 2, which ones fit into 3, how do I fit my outside information into that. No intro or conclusion. That's why it's a mini essay. It's just like 3 little paragraphs and a thesis at the beginning. And maybe you can restate your thesis a different way if you want to at the end. But you don't need an intro, you don't need a conclusion. Okay, this is just strictly looking at, can you use the sources and your own mind to conceptualize about a question? Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Again, here's the mark band. I think it's pretty easy. Generally, you all do pretty well on these, provided you study and review the topic in question. Final thoughts and tips. First off, I have a whole handout about these different things: OPCVL sentence frames, a guide to each of the questions and kind of how to answer them and what you should look at. It's all in the IB history starter pack that I gave you at the beginning of the year, or you might have it left over from last year when they were all different floating documents. You can find them. I reopened my Teams. You can get all the files that we've ever had on there about not just that, but also the topic. So first off, be very clear as to which question you're answering. Make sure you go to the Move to Global War section and answer those questions, but make sure you very clearly write 1A, 1B, 2, 3, okay, so that they know, goodness, what questions you're answering. Read through the questions before analyzing the sources. That's just how I would do it, so that you know what to be looking for. Like, oh, I'm going to be looking at the main ideas of this source. I'm going to be looking at the supporting details of this source. I'll be comparing these 2 sources. Just so when you go through them, you're going to be thinking about main ideas, supporting details, OPCVL, probably with all of them, but it allows you to be a little more focused on what you focus on. Annotate the sources, annotate everything, even restaurant menus, make sure you do it. It'll help you. You know, if you know which source you have to do OPCVL for, you can annotate OPCVL for that one. Okay? What happened? Hungry caterpillar. Don't annotate OPCVL for all the sources, for crying out loud, though. Budget your time, start on question 1, do question 4 last. Some people think it's strategic to start with question 4 because it's worth the most marks, but you spend all your time on question 4 and you don't do it well, then you're kind of up the proverbial crick, if you know what I mean. So start with question 1, it's the easiest, knock it out 5-10 minutes. Do question 2 or 3 next, it doesn't matter. Do the one that's left over after that and do question 4 last. Again, question 4, just thesis, couple paragraphs, make sure you include some outside information, get in, get out, like Kim Kardashian's marriage to Chris Humphries. Use the information in the sources to your advantage, but also consider what you already know. That's why we spent time in class learning about it. Make sure you think about what you already know, but make sure you're also using the sources. That's why paper 1 is nice. It gives you almost all the information you need right there, but you do need to know things outside of that. That's pretty much it. I'm gonna peace out before Finian decides he needs his 3:30 snack. Actually, it's a 3 o'clock snack that he's overdue on. So we'll see what happens here. What do you think about that? Okay. If you want me to make a video about anything else, well, I'll do paper 2 and 3 kind of together. And if you want anything else other than just content review, if you want things about the exam, I can do that as well. Otherwise, have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.